What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Oak Tree Football Channel. Today, I continue my NFL predictions. Today, I'm going to be making my predictions for the AFC South. Now, the AFC South isn't that good of a division. I think there are a few contenders in there, but it just isn't the best division overall, in my opinion. Probably the worst in the AFC, but I do think the AFC East isn't that good either. But it's going to be very interesting to see the final standings this year because I really think there are three teams that could finish with that number one spot. There is one team I just don't see it. You probably know who it is, and I'll talk more about that later. But without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with number 4, and nobody should be surprised at this one. At number 4, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars coming in with a record of 2-14. The Jaguars right now are probably the worst team in the NFL. A few weeks ago for me, they weren't the worst team in the NFL, but then they traded Unique Ngakoue, and they cut Leonard Fournette. So for me, this is the worst team in the NFL, and 2-14 sounds like a good record for them. At quarterback, they have Gardner Minshew. I don't hate Gardner Minshew as a player. I actually like him, but he just does not have the pieces around him. He's not a bad quarterback by any means. He just does not have the pieces around him at all. And he's probably going to struggle this year. Yes, he has a few good receivers, he does, but overall, it's just not the best group around him, and I think people would agree with me if I say that. Running back, they're probably going to be starting Chris Thompson, former Washington Redskin, obviously now the Washington football team, but he was okay, but he had a few injuries at times. I believe it was the 2018 season, he was actually pretty good before he got injured. So he can be good at times, but I don't expect much from him this year, to be honest. I don't think he's going to be that good. Wide receivers, they have Chris Conley, DJ Chark, D.D. Westbrook, and Laviska Shenault, who they drafted in the second round of this year's draft. It isn't too bad of a receiving group. D.D. Westbrook can play on a high level. Same with DJ Chark, was taken a few years ago, and he can definitely be a good receiver. Chris Conley can be at times, and I really like Laviska Shenault in college. I'm excited to see how he plays in the professionals, but it's an okay receiving group. It's not bad in my opinion, but it's definitely not anything good. Tight ends, they have James O'Shaughnessy and Tyler Eifert. Not bad there. Tyler Eifert's actually a very good tight end, but he can barely ever stay healthy. When he's on the field, he's a really good player, but when he's not on the field, not so much. And then the offensive line isn't great. They have a few solid players in there, but overall it's just not very good of an offensive line. So that offense just is not very good. The defense is okay. The defense, of course, a few years ago when they made that AFC Championship run, the defense was the main point, but just not anymore. They traded so many players on both the offense and the defense, but specifically the defense. Jalen Ramsey, AJ Bouye, Calais Campbell, recently Unique Ngakoue. So many players are gone now that really were some of the main points in this defense, and it's just not the same team anymore. At the defensive end position, they have Dwayne Smoot, not the best player, but they also have Josh Allen, was a rookie last year, going into his second year. He's a pretty good player, and I think he could have a good season. He's very, very talented, Josh Allen. So he is one of the better players in this Jaguars team right now. So I expect, decent numbers for him this season. Defensive tackle, they have Taven Bryan, taken in the first round 2 years ago in the 2018 draft. He's been okay, nothing special, nothing bad. Linebacking group is okay. They have Miles Jack, Joe Schobert, and they drafted K'Lavon Chaisson in the first round. That isn't a terrible linebacking group, to be honest. Joe Schobert is actually a pretty good player, and I liked K'Lavon Chaisson in college, but not that good of a linebacking group. It's definitely not bad. It's just about average, maybe a bit above average. Cornerbacks, they drafted C.J. Henderson in the first round. They have DJ Hayden and Trey Herndon. It's not a terrible cornerback group, but if you had Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye here, it would be a lot better. And I mean, that's pretty obvious. I think CJ Henderson can be a good player, and I do like DJ Hayden as a player, but just not the best cornerback group. But it's not bad. And then safeties, you have Jerron Wilson starting there. It's just not the best team overall. I mean, their defense has some good players, but overall, this is just not that good of a team, and 2-14 really would not surprise me. And personally, I want the Jaguars to do good. I don't want them to do bad, but I just don't see them doing good at all. 2-14 for me, maybe 3-13, but somewhere around that, and that's why I have them easily finishing bottom of the AFC South. Moving on to number 3 with a record of 7-9, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I don't think the Colts are a bad team. But a lot of people are saying they're going to be really, really good this year, and I just don't see that. I think I understand why some people say that, because they were pretty good last year, and they had Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback, who wasn't the best player, but I don't think they're going to be fantastic. I definitely don't think they'll be bad, but they could definitely be a lot better in my opinion. I'm finishing about average, 7-9, 8-8 sounds reasonable for me. I could see them sneaking into the playoffs, but I think 7-9, 8-8 is pretty reasonable for them this season. At quarterback, they signed Phillip Rivers from the Chargers. He's played his whole career with the Chargers, been pretty successful, but last year was not great. We'll have to see if that changes this year, or he still throws a lot of interceptions. I believe he threw the third most interceptions, maybe fourth most last year, behind only Jameis Winston, I believe Baker Mayfield. So I think it was third in interceptions. So if he cuts down on the interceptions this year, the Colts could be a real contender. I think he'll throw some interceptions early, but he'll get better as the season goes on. But we'll have to see. Running back group, to be honest, the Colts have one of the best running back groups in football with Marlon Mack, who is a really, really good player. They drafted Jonathan Taylor, who was arguably the best running back in this year's draft class. They have Nyheim Hines, who is a really, really talented, pretty underrated player. I really like him. And then Jordan Wilkins, who is a player that could be a backup for some teams. I don't think he's starting material, but he's a pretty good running back overall, so it's a fantastic running back group. Wide receivers are okay. T.Y. Hilton, when he's healthy, is a great player, but last year he wasn't completely healthy. He played a bit and just wasn't very impressive. If he can be healthy this season and play like he has in the past, he could be really, really good this season because he's a fantastic player. They drafted Michael Pittman Jr. in the second round. I like Pittman Jr. as a player. I liked him in college, and I think he can be pretty good in the NFL. They also have Paris Campbell. It's an okay receiving group. I think it needs a little bit more depth, but it's definitely not bad. Tight end, they have Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. They also have Mo Alley Cox. So it's a pretty good tight end group. Some of these guys, they're not the best players, but they can definitely get the job done for a tight end. Jack Doyle is a very good tight end, and Trey Burton can be pretty good as well. So it is a pretty good tight end group. Offensive line is pretty good. On there, specifically at left guard, they have Quentin Nelson. He's a fantastic player. I mean, he's only been in the league for a few years. I believe he was drafted 2018 in the first round. Already one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, which is just incredible when you think about it. They also have Anthony Costanzo on that offensive line, who's a really good player. This is a pretty good offensive line overall. So, the main point there is Quentin Nelson, young player, already one of the best offensive linemen. But this is just a good team all around, or a good offensive line all around. So, pretty good offense. And then looking at the defense, the defensive ends, they have Justin Houston. Houston is a good player. I think he's been better in the past, but he's definitely still a good player, and I wouldn't count him out to see him have a big season this year. Defensive tackle, they traded for DeForest Buckner from the San Francisco 49ers. That was a really good trade for them. I never liked Buckner too much, but I definitely never thought he was a bad player. I do think he's a good player, and I think that's really going to help out the Indianapolis Colts this year. At middle linebacker, they have Bobby Okereke, Anthony Walker, and Darius Leonard, who also is one of the best at his position in the NFL and was only taken in the 2018 NFL draft. Darius Leonard is a really, really good linebacker, and he was good in his rookie season, but he was just incredible last year. And if he can play even close to that this season, or even better, he's going to be one of the best linebackers in football, probably. Cornerbacks, they have Rock Ya-Sin, who they took in the second round of last year's draft, Xavier Rhodes, who they recently signed from the Minnesota Vikings, and TJ Carey. They also have Kenny Moore as a backup. So that's a good cornerback group overall. Xavier Rhodes isn't as good as he used to. Wasn't great last year. Still somehow made the Pro Bowl, but he still is... he's not a bad player. I definitely wouldn't say that. So it's a good cornerback group. And then safeties, they have Malik Hooker and Khari Willis. Khari Willis is okay, but Malik Hooker is a fantastic player. I'm pretty sure they didn't pick up his fifth-year option, which is surprising. But he's a really, really good player. And I think he can be very, very good for the Colts this year. So for me, I don't see them winning this division. They could win this division, but I think it's more likely they finish second or third. Their roster is pretty talented on paper. Wouldn't be surprised to see them finish second or third. But I just think we're going to see early struggles from Phillip Rivers. As the season goes on, I think this team will get better. But early in the year, I think they're going to struggle, and I think that's really what's going to set them back and have them finish third in this division with a record of 7-9. Now moving on to number 2, also coming in with a record of 7-9, I have the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans were a really, really good team last year. They were able to win this division, but there was one big move that really put them down a bit, in my opinion, and that was trading DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I still think this is going to be a good team. I have them finishing 8-8, but I think that's really going to hit them hard. Without Hopkins, they're going to be not as good. They still have an okay receiving group, but they don't have a true number one receiver. They have a few guys who can be number twos, but they don't really have anyone that can be a number one, which I'll talk more about. Quarterback, they have Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is a fantastic quarterback, probably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Recently just signed a contract extension today. As the date of filming, he signed a new contract extension. And he is now the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL, I believe, with $39 million a year. So the Texans agree that he is a fantastic quarterback. He is definitely the franchise quarterback for the team. Great player. Running back, not great. They have David Johnson and Duke Johnson. Of course, they traded for David Johnson in the DeAndre Hopkins trade, which just didn't make sense. David Johnson in a second-round pick for arguably the best receiver in the NFL. Didn't make much sense, but I mean, the Texans, I guess they wanted David Johnson, so they'll see what they can do with him. I think he could get better this year. A few years ago, David Johnson was one of the best running backs in football. Then he got injured. He hasn't been as good since. I think he could get better this season. Just he's nowhere close to as good as how DeAndre Hopkins would have been for this team. Wide receivers, they have Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, and Kiki Kuti. So 5 solid receivers. All those guys are solid. But at best, those guys are number 2 receivers. None of those guys are number 1 receivers. Maybe you can make an argument Kenny Stills and maybe Brandon Cooks, but none of the others. Will Fuller is a pretty good player when he's on the field, but he's been injured in the past. Brandon Cooks has had injuries, and he's been traded so many times in his career. Kenny Stills, he was pretty good for the Texans last year. I think he might be the number 1 receiver on this team, but there's 5 good players, but no real number 1, which is really what's going to hold them back, I think, this season. Tight end, they have Darren Fells. He's okay. Nothing bad, nothing special. Offensive line is not great. It was not very good last year. Last year they traded for Laramie Tunsil, which made it better, but still it's not that good of an offensive line. Looking on the defensive end, they have J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt is arguably the best defensive end in football. He's had a lot of injuries in his career, and he's probably declined a bit, but when he's on the field, he is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, and that's just a fact. I believe he won Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, and a lot of the recent years he's been injured, which is just fantastic. He's an incredible player, and if he's staying on the field, that gives another reason why the Texans can potentially make the playoffs this year. Linebacking group is okay. They have Benardrick McKinney, Zach Cunningham, and Whitney Merciless. None of those guys are anything special, but none of those guys are bad. Just about average players. Cornerbacks, they have Bradley Roby, Vernon Hargraves, and Garyon Conley. Once again, just about average players. Nothing special, but definitely not bad. And then safeties, they have Justin Reed and Eric Murray. Justin Reed I like as a player, not as much Eric Murray. The defense isn't great, but there definitely are some bright spots there. So it's just an okay team overall, and I think they're just going to be an okay team this year. I have them finishing 8-8, which you never know. With 7 playoff teams, that could get them a playoff spot. But I think this team is good, but I definitely think there are better teams in the NFL. And moving on to number 1, I have the Tennessee Titans coming in with a record of 10-6. Now, the Titans, of course, had that incredible playoff run last year, but I don't think they got much better this year. So, you could make an argument that they'll once again go 9-7, but because they didn't make too many offseason moves, they didn't really, I believe they didn't have a first-round pick, or no, they did have a first-round pick, but it wasn't the best pick, in my opinion. But they're lucky because this division got arguably worse. Maybe the Colts got better, but the Texans got worse, the Jaguars got worse. So they should still win the division. They do still have some competition, but I think 10-6, 9-7 should be enough to win this division. Quarterback, they have Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill is a very good quarterback. He was very good last year. I think he's a very talented player and should be pretty good this year, just about above average. Arguably top 10 in the NFL. So he can have a good season, most likely. At running back, they have Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is an incredible running back. He is arguably the best running back in the NFL, probably top 3. He was incredible last season. I believe he led the NFL in rushing, and he was a huge part of why the Tennessee Titans were able to make it to the AFC Championship. Wide receiving group is okay. They have Adam Humphries and Corey Davis, first-round pick a few years ago. But the main point of that team is A.J. Brown. Was a rookie last year and was really, really good. Arguably, probably, in my opinion, the best rookie receiver of last season. He probably improved this season, so I expect some big numbers from him, and I expect big numbers from him going forward in his career. At tight end, they have Jonnu Smith and Anthony Ferkshire. Not the best tight end group. It's not bad. They can still get the job done, but it definitely could be better. Offensive line is okay. Taylor Lewan is on there. They got Roger Saffold. It's an okay offensive line. There's definitely that's where they drafted their first pick. They took Isaiah Wilson, the right tackle from, I believe, Georgia. He might not even start this year. He may be a backup. So it's an okay offensive line. Not great, not bad either. At defensive end, they have Jeffrey Simmons, taken in the first round of last year's draft. Didn't really show us much last season. I think he can be good this season, but not the best player overall. Defensive tackles, they have Jack Crawford and Daquan Jones. Once again, not the best players. They can be okay this season, but not the best players. I would prefer Jack Crawford out of those two, but none of those are great players. Linebacking group is pretty good. They have Vic Beasley, Jayon Brown, Rashawn Evans, and Harold Landry. There are some good players in there. Vic Beasley can be a good player, but hasn't been fantastic for a while. Harold Landry was a second-round pick 2 years ago. He can definitely be good. Rashawn Evans was a first-round pick 2 years ago. Once again, can also be good. It's an okay linebacking group. Nothing special, definitely nothing bad either. Cornerbacks, they have Adoree Jackson, and a few years ago they signed Malcolm Butler, the hero in the Super Bowl a few years ago when the Seattle Seahawks played the New England Patriots, of course. Two okay cornerbacks. I mean, Adoree Jackson, I haven't been too impressed with him in his career, but I don't think he's a bad cornerback. They also have Christian Fulton, who they drafted in the second round. It's an okay cornerbacking group. Malcolm Butler hasn't been as good since he joined the Titans, but he's been okay. And then safeties, they have Kenny Vaccaro and Kevin Byard. Both those guys are really good. Byard led the NFL in interceptions a few years ago. He's a really, really good safety, and I do like Kenny Vaccaro as a player. So this is a really good Titans team. I think it's the best in the division. I don't think it's one of the best in the NFL. But it should be good enough to win them this division. It isn't the strongest division, and that is why I have the Tennessee Titans finishing on top with a record of 10-6. So those are my predictions for the AFC South this season. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new around here, feel free to subscribe for more NFL and college football content. For the next few days, I'm going to be doing daily content because there's so much content I want to get out before the NFL season starts and before some of the better teams, Power 5 college football teams start playing in college football. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.